Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so this is an old but gold case. So you may have seen this one before. It was one that was done by Sorsha, so it may be familiar to some of you. But this lady is 33 years old. She is a Gravida 2 paranaut. Had a previous TOP in 2005. BMI of 34, previous HSV positive in 2013. So she was, as per guideline, treated with aciclovir from 36 weeks onwards. O negative, had anti-D at 29 weeks, virology and scats NAD. Pretty low risk pregnancy. Ooh. Pretty low risk pregnancy. So on the 11th of the month, she came in at 39+1 with SHROM. She was seen in triage, and because of sort of being low risk, she was discharged home with the plan to come back in 24 hours post SHROM. Okay.
Nothing.
Pardon? Sorry, somebody.
That was me. My daughter.
Oh, okay.
To me.
Perfect. Okay. So this was the 12th. So she came back in. Why is that not showing me? It's not what I want. So she came back in on the 12th of the month. So this is now 24 hours post. She goes to our antenatal ward and she is put on the CTG. 0911, the CTG's commenced. Plan is for augmentation. She wasn't really contracting, but she was definitely tightening regularly. So she's put on at 0911. At 0925, she is examined, found to be 2 centimeters dilated, long, posterior, and completely uneffaced. She is contracting regularly and feeling pressure as of 0940, and she's cannulated. That is it. Okay, fine. Cool. Thoughts on this one?
Towards the end of it, are those 2 dips D cells or loss of contraction or maternal pulse? Do we know?
Those are in fact decelerations, and they look kind of variable to me. There's a bit of shouldering on both of them, but considering she's 2 centimeters dilated, something that we just probably keep an eye on and definitely escalate to labour ward, considering she's antenatal still. So yeah, and then this is the
sorry,
yeah.
How many weeks did we say?
39 and 2 B.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's all right. So at 10:15, decelerations are noted on the CTG trace. Great escalation here. So the midwife called labour ward, and the CTG was discontinued and she was transferred over. Her observations at this point were blood pressure of 120/84, pulse of 76, resps of 18, and a temperature of 36.5. Mum was feeling well, no major concerns, and she was contracting well, and she wasn't really requesting any additional pain relief at this point either. So it all seemed to be well. But yeah, we're definitely seeing more sort of deceleration here. It does look like a little bit of loss of contact within them, but this was confirmed by the fact that the midwives checked the maternal pulse, and also that we have got some good clarity on the CTG. Any comments or anything?
Seems like they've done what they should have done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's our plan going forwards then?
Continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
Reg in the room to review and make a plan.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So she is taken to labour ward, and this is your first 30 minutes of CTG here. Bear in mind, so our baseline previously has been sat at around 130. Cleo, do you want to comment?
Not really. Doesn't look very nice, but it doesn't look the worst. But there is shouldering, and there is ability.
So when it comes to shoulder, go on. With the shouldering side of things, obviously we always learn to kind of take that as these are really reassuring signs. But what I would say with shouldering is, although it's reassuring and it kind of gives us this impression that, okay, baby's like compensating by kind of, we always describe it as like taking in that breath, then dipping down to the decel, then recovering from it afterwards. What I noticed in this specific slide was that there's a couple of decels that we can see which do look like they've got shoulders, but I'm not quite convinced that there's
No,
an
only probably the last one.
yeah. And it's quite, so if you look at the one that's sort of 10, I don't know, 10:30-ish, sort of in between the middle sort of lines, there's an overshoot on it. So it's not necessarily shouldering beforehand, but it's actually sort of an overshoot afterwards.
Yeah.
Which could be, well, could eventually become like concerns of hypoxia.
But the baseline's dropped.
Yeah, baseline's also dropped.
It has actually maintained the variability at the moment, which is a good sign. But
yeah, absolutely. Baseline drop. I wouldn't necessarily be majorly concerned if the baseline had dropped. If the baseline had dropped and the variability had also decreased, I'd be concerned that we've got like a terminal heart failure here. However, when it comes to sort of keeping that variability at its baseline, then it's less sort of concerning. But yeah, there's definitely something not quite right going on with this fetus. So the plan, there wasn't a plan made at this point. I don't think there was an obstetric review for a little while. Activity, I think, was quite high on this day, although they did get a good transfer over to labour ward quite quickly. But yeah, the baseline is sort of sat around 120, 125 towards the end and at the very beginning. But that middle sort of section, these contractions are really having an impact on this fetus, aren't they? Cool. We'll go to the next slide here. So baseline sort of remains where it is, but it looks a little bit like our variability is quite reduced. The midwife that was caring for this woman did a re-examination to apply an FSE due to the amount of loss of contact and due to the fact that the trace was looking quite poor, found her to be 7 centimetres dilated and the presenting part was at spine. So she's made really, really quick progress, which is excellent. But if we look at her contractions as well, she's bordering on contracting sort of 5 in 10.
It's nearly too much. It's nearly hyperstimulating.
Yeah, so obviously, like if we go by definition, our tachysystole is sort of contracting 5 in 10 or more, but our hyperstimulation is when we've got tachysystole with fetal compromise. So with the fetal compromise here, we've got a reduction in variability and we've also got decelerations at the moment as well. Although this FSE wasn't put on until the very end of this, so hopefully the next slide will be an awful lot more clear. But what's our action plan? Anybody want to suggest anything?
How's the woman coping with all these contractions?
She's doing well, so no request for pain relief at this point. She's breathing through them and she's got Entonox.
Consider terbutaline.
Yeah. If this continues. What would be your, okay, now it's time to give terbutaline? Is there any specific, is there something that we're waiting for before we give it, or?
Probably a bradycardia.
The baby was already not coping and now the contractions are going, so we don't want to wait and compromise the baby further.
Yeah, so would you give terbutaline here, B?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the trace is quite poor. The quality of the trace is quite poor.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's actually quite hard to work out what's going on. So if the FSE was applied, then it would be better to look. You know, I'm not saying don't give terbutaline. I'm saying that the trace is quite poor and it's very difficult. She's contracting obviously really well and actually progressing, but it's impossible really with that trace to make a sort of definitive call on anything other than it doesn't look very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And also towards the end of the CTG, I think this may have been when she was getting into a position change. So between sort of 11:07 and 11:17. So we've got what could actually be a maternal pulse, but it also could be a deceleration or even a prolonged deceleration here. But until we've got that FSC on to get better clarity, we're not going to know, are we?
Not really.
Okay, here's your next slide. So the FSC is now put on. No maternal observations were done in this time either. So just to sort of highlight this as a sort of key message from this case, guys. That one set of observations that you saw at the very beginning before she was transferred over to labour ward from Hope, that was the only set of maternal obs done throughout this entire review. So if we are ever concerned about the fact that we may be having decelerations or if it is maternal pulse that we're picking up, please make sure that we are actually checking maternal pulse manually alongside the CTG as well. Just because it just gives so much better clarity. And when we come to review these kinds of cases, it gives us a much better indication as to whether or not this is baby or not if you've manually checked her pulse. And it's something that I sort of say is a key message quite a lot. But yeah, just to sort of highlight that and encourage everybody to do so. What about this one? What are we thinking here?
Well, she's still decelerating. They look like earlies. They're kind of in line with the contraction.
Yeah.
The variability is still there.
What do earlies tend to be an indication of, Cleo?
Head compression.
Yeah.
So it's possible. I mean, she's still contracting a lot, and it's something to keep an eye on because it could go off very quickly.
Mm.
I mean, I'd like to tell the doctor at this point, this is what's going on in here.
Yeah.
To make them aware.
Absolutely. They are almost completely in line with the contractions that we've got. I don't know whether I would call these earlies. I think tend to be, because it's a sort of vasovagal response, they tend to be slightly shallower. I'd go more variable, but then to be honest with you, when it comes to the definition of these decelerations, I say this again as well quite often, is the fact that, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to name these things or categorize the hypoxia or categorize what the CTG is. And a lot of the time, I think it's more important to think, okay, what are we going to do about it, as opposed to naming whatever they are. But yeah, these tend to be slightly more V-shaped with more concerning characteristics. We've got no variability within these decelerations either. So this is kind of giving me an indication that this baby is becoming a lot more poorly.
Well, they're longer as well. They're not just 15 seconds. They're going on for longer than that. So
yeah,
definitely something to keep an eye on. But if she's progressed like that, you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and this also, you know, if they are early decelerations and they are sort of in line with these contractions, then it could be an indication that she's made even further progress since that last examination.
Poor baby.
Anybody want to jump to deliver this baby?
Not right now.
Want to see a bit more?
I'll depend on the next slide.
Yeah. So when it comes to sort of variable decelerations as well, when it comes to those specifically that are with contractions, we know that this is a normal fetal response to contractions. This is what they do. They hold their breath, they go under the water, and then they come back up for air again once it's over. So although these are sort of our, you know, things that we're concerned about, at this point in time, we're not going to necessarily rush to theatre, because we know that the baby is then sort of stabilizing itself in between. We've still got a stable baseline, and although our variability is reduced, there are some areas where it's sort of normal. Okay, so we move on.
Right.
Have not yet given terbutaline. The contractions are becoming broader. Now we are having like brady. What is happening here? Is it loss of contact or is it brady continuing?
So Beatrice, what's the difference between a bradycardia and a prolonged deceleration?
It's more than three without going back to the baseline.
What's the difference though? What
More than 3 minutes.
is a what?
The bradycardia.
So with a bradycardia, it's actually more than 10. So just so we're using like the correct terminology when we're on the ward, we always sort of go around shouting out what the problem is. So if there's an emergency and the emergency bell is pulled, but a prolonged deceleration is one that lasts for more than 3 minutes, and a bradycardia, it needs to get to 10 minutes before we can classify it as a bradycardia. Just so we're fully aware of our sort of terminology when it comes to these kinds of emergencies on the ward, because somebody's going to come an awful lot quicker if you say bradycardia than they are if you say prolonged deceleration. But yeah, we're also experiencing now, we're getting decelerations with every contraction. We've got reduced variability within our decelerations as well, and we're having more prolonged.
And they take longer to return to the baseline, which
they are, yeah,
is now suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Our baseline hasn't risen, so it's not like your typical signs of like a gradually evolving hypoxia, where normally we would see a baseline rise before the variability is reduced either. Anybody want to give a shout and like classify this one?
Suspicious.
Still going suspicious, even with that prolonged decel?
Not suspicious, it's the next one, but I can't think what it is.
I would say abnormal because it's less time at the baseline.
So abnormal is not a category of
pathological.
Well, it's either pathological, it's pathological.
Yeah. So what we're going to do?
Get the baby out. Okay. We haven't, and get the baby out.
So what can we do to improve it though? What's causing these decelerations?
The prolonged contractions.
Yeah.
Reduce the contractions.
Absolutely.
Have they changed like positions and stuff?
So
or is that too far gone now?
I mean, to be honest, when it comes to changing positions, we normally change positions if we've got baroreceptor decelerations or we've got decelerations that are indications of cord compression. So the likelihood is, these are, do you know, these are cord compression. These most likely are cord compression, considering they are still alongside every contraction. But in order for us to improve this CTG, in order to rest the baby and try and give it a period of time where it can recover, changing position absolutely is always good to do in any situation like this. But realistically, if we stop the contractions or we at least reduce them, we're going to give this baby more of a chance to recover from it. And moving position isn't going to reduce the amount of contraction she's having. It's just going to change the way that maybe the blood flow is going through to the baby.
So don't you think that you should have given the terbutaline earlier on when they did the VX 7 centimeter with the FSC, because baby would have been able to recover probably, because now it's like you've put more stress on the baby with the amount of contractions, and like Beatrice is saying, now it seems that she's not always getting that much rest in between contractions, because it just looks like it's really continuous.
The thing is, if we go back just quickly to the sort of 7 centimeters here, yes, we could. I mean, what's the effects of terbutaline? It increases our baseline, maternal tachycardia and sometimes fetal tachycardia. Yeah, that's just a generic symptom or a side effect, if you like, of giving terbutaline. In this case here, we've got a baby that's compensated. We've got a baby that's, although they're having decelerations, our baseline is still stable. Our variability is sort of variable and somewhat normal. It is sat at around 5. So yes, you could give terbutaline. However, we don't necessarily at this point, this specific segment, need to give it just yet, but we're going to have it in the room on standby if this then continues. She's not having decelerations with every contraction. If there was increased maternal distress or discomfort in this time, then obviously you can again consider it. She's got no propus we can remove. She's got no Synto on that we can reduce down or turn off. So our next best thing is to give terbutaline. At this point, I don't think it's 100% necessary. Some people absolutely would give it, but some people wouldn't. However, here, now that we've got these decels with every single contraction, we've been having prolonged decelerations as well, then absolutely this is the time to say, okay, we've got a baby that's now very much compensating with decelerations, as well as reducing the variability just slightly. And actually, towards the end of the CTG here, our baseline's risen slightly up to 140, whereas it was sat previously at around 120. So we've got a baby that's trying to compensate, but is now becoming increasingly more hypoxic in doing so. So at this point, absolutely, terbutaline, I would give.
Did they?
They did. So they gave it at 12:24. Obviously the usual route. So yeah, I think it took maybe 3 or 4 minutes to sort of sink in. Baseline's sort of gone up to 140 as it was 125 previously. So we have had more than a 10% increase in baseline. Although that could be contributory from the terbutaline, because we know it does cause some sort of a fetal tachycardia sometimes. And her pulse, mum's pulse is actually 88. So whether or not it's had the impact on baby first, that's kind of unusual. You see them both go up at the same time. But yeah, here we've got a baby that's still got reduced variability, but that has had somewhat of a 15-minute rest before it then continues to have decelerations further along. How long does terbutaline normally work for?
I don't know, but is it short period? Because it shouldn't be, because isn't it not meant to be quite like effective? So if it's meant to be trying to change something quite quickly, shouldn't the lifespan be like shorter?
Yeah. So
I don't know, like half an hour. That's me guessing, but it's like half an hour maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Terbutaline itself, if you look it up on like the BNF, the sort of the drug itself sits within your system for around 4 to 6 hours after you've given it. It's
not effective all that time though.
No.
Probably lasts about an hour.
So how long does it last for? Like a couple hours then?
So it depends on the person. It depends on your metabolism for it as well, because obviously some people it sort of wears off a lot quicker. Majority of people, majority of CTGs, you'll see a significant improvement for a minimum of about 20 minutes, and that can last up to an hour or two. Sometimes it very much varies depending on the woman. Also, what are our when would we not give terbutaline?
When?
Pardon?
You're saying when shouldn't we give terbutaline?
Yeah.
In case we are suspecting an ablation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So we want to definitely rule out the fact that we may have some sort of blood-stained like or if we've got any PV bleeding before we give it.
It's difficult that because if she's contracting and gone that quickly, she's bound to have a heavy blood-stained show, which might mask any feeling you've got about it.
Yeah.
But she's still having contractions, which leads one to suspect that her stomach's not completely rock hard.
I mean, what we are seeing is from here is that we are it looks like we're getting some break between the contractions, isn't it? However, there is no record anywhere of any palpation of the abdomen.
Which, because it's a term baby, it would probably be very hard if it was an abruption.
Yeah. How frequently can we give it?
I don't actually know. I have to be really honest.
So terbutaline we can give every 15 minutes.
Oh, but how many doses?
Cara?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think someone is asking what I'm about to say, because I think we I don't know, but you may correct me that if we need to give a third terbutaline, that should be, we are heading to theatre.
Yeah. So I'm in the process at the moment of sort of rewriting our guideline, because the use of terbutaline isn't very specific in the guideline that we currently have. I think it does say that we can give sort of 15 minutes apart and whatnot, but it doesn't really say what our, if we were to write an SOP for it, it doesn't really say, okay, yeah, after we've given the first one, if we're having to give a second one, what should we be doing about it? So that's all to come. Mr. Naguib, I think he's not on the call, he couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately, but he's always responded to it as in, if you're having to give a third one, then we should be escalating this further. If that requires us to go for delivery or whatnot, then that's absolutely necessary. But yeah, after you've given 2, you can only give a maximum of 3 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if we've given the third one and that's having no impact, then we do need to be moving. Cool. We continue?
Mm-hmm.
What's our thought process now, guys?
My daughter said don't have sex. And you wouldn't find yourself in a situation. Sorry, that was just my daughter.
Well,
I forgot the name for it, but when the variability is too variable, I forgot what it's called.
saltatory.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sinusoidal is like the fetal anemia where it looks like a wave.
Like shark's teeth. I can't see. It begins with an S. It's too confusing, this.
What does saltatory pattern indicate, Beth?
I can't remember.
Sometimes it can be an indication of neurological instability.
HIE.
Yeah, well, yeah, there are some cases, although that's not, I wouldn't say that was a really common link between the two. But what who are we going to want in the room right now?
Doctor.
Yeah.
Peds
Peds, yeah.
as well, and deliver.
And deliver.
Yeah, would you not deliver at this point now?
We've got to the point, haven't we, where we've.
Yeah.
I mean, you could give another terbutaline. It appeared to work with this woman for about 15 minutes. It was given at 12:24, so once it got worse again, you could always consider another one. Mr. Naguib again always highlights the benefits of terbutaline in that, you know, say for example she's fully dilated right now. Maya says the exact same thing as well. If you've given terbutaline, you give the uterus a rest, which then in turn gives the baby a rest. You can then at this point transfer over to the obstetric theatres with the terbutaline on board, and then by the time you get to theatre, you can reassess the situation. It will have come to an impact at this point, and at that point you can make your decision on whether or not you need to deliver this baby via cesarean section or whether or not you can go for a trial. So this woman specifically, that does tell you in the next slide, I think. But if, for example, she was fully right now, even though we would sort of be like, okay, that's fantastic, that means we can deliver her. That's not always the best option. We always should be encouraging everybody to try and give the babies a break before we then start pushing. We've got a baby that's clearly very much compensating, is well, trying very hard to compensate here. If we then add the additional stress of pushing onto this baby,
It's going to be
we're going to cause more damage, aren't we? So instead of being excited about the fact that she's fully and encouraging a fast delivery, actually stopping, taking a step back, giving another terbutaline and maybe giving this more of a chance to recover before we then start pushing. If she is fully dilated, we're going to try and improve the outcome for this fetus, aren't we?
We are.
So this is, so at 13:23, she's examined and found to be 8 centimetres dilated. This is by the midwife. So I don't think an obstetrician's been in the room for this time. Unfortunately, I don't know if the central monitoring was working because this one was a case from quite a while ago. This was escalated to the obstetric team, and then within 7 minutes, the decision was made to transfer to theatre. So at the end of the CTG here, the obstetric team have come in, they've reviewed her and they've said, okay, we need to go for a cesarean section. If she's fully in theatre, then we can deliver her in theatre.
And some of the variability.
So did they give the second terbutaline or not, Cam?
No. Okay, so she goes into theatre. The timings are wrong, by the way, guys. So apologies for that. I think the CTG in theatre on this day must have been an hour behind or whatever, an hour ahead. So she actually went into theatre at 13:45, I think. They did 5 spinal attempts in theatre, which all failed.
Shit.
That's horrendous.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, this poor woman, bless her. So the plan was, let's examine her. If she's fully, we'll go for a trial. But if she's not, she's going to have a GA section. So she's in theatre. She's got no pain relief on board because we haven't been successful with it. And this is your CTG. So at 14:23, so actually on there it's 15:23, the consultant comes in, finds her to be fully dilated, presenting part at spines and OT. They did a manual rotation in theatre and they were luckily very successful with the Kiwi. First pull, head was out and the baby was born a minute later. So we were lucky with the sort of outcome of this delivery, and the fact that this woman had made such excellent progress in labour. Otherwise, we've got a baby that's compensated, is showing us signs of decompensating, is showing us signs of struggle, and then we're going to use a GA, which is going to affect the placental perfusion, and our baby's probably going to be born in not fantastic condition.
What were the outgoes?
Well, would you like to guess, Cleo?
9, 10 and 10.
I bet it was decent because when we do things, it's always that they're decent.
Say that again.
Sorry, go on, Beth.
No, it's just a side note. 5 attempts seems excessive. Surely is there not a limit before that?
I think this was by 2 different anaesthetists, Beth.
But even still, 5
Yeah,
between them.
I think there was 2 or 3 attempts by one and then 2 or 3 by the other.
God, that's bad. That's really bad.
So bad.
Mm.
I bet her back.
Listen, guys, when I was in labour, they did it in 4 attempts. By the 3rd one, I was like, if you guys don't get this, I'm out me.
Don't blame you.
I don't blame you either.
Okay. I'll go with 7, 10 and 10.
Okay.
I think it's a 5.
I feel like this baby came out screaming.
Yeah, that's me. I think it came out screaming. I think it just went like, hey, you.
What about our gases?
They probably weren't that great. They would have shown some sort of acute acute compromise rather than a chronic one.
Say that again.
I think they would have shown some sort of acute compromise rather than a chronic situation, long-standing. I think it is an acute. So I'd say they're probably like 7.1.
Yeah, arterial 7.1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else want to have a guess?
I would
So I was
agree.
thinking the same.
7.15.
Okay. This baby was born with APGARs of 9, 10, and 10.
See, I told you. It's
Classic.
joking.
They do this. It did well. It maintained baseline, and the variability was slightly reduced, but not significantly for too long. But arterial pH 7.18 with a base excess of -4.2 and a lactate of 6. So there was definitely
compromise.
pardon.
There was definitely a compromise, but I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
bad. It was an acute one.
Yeah.
Trying to explain to the student, like, if the gap between the arterial and the venous is low, that's a long-standing indication, long-standing situation. Whereas this was like an acute, because it started out all right.
Yeah. And then venous pH 7.29, base excess -7.3, and lactate of 5.2.
They're not even that bad.
Pardon?
They're not even that bad.
They're not. I mean, the lactate is high.
High, but I mean, the rest of it is not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah. Promob's neonatal team review and was discharged home the next day, which is a great outcome. Cool. Thanks so much for contributing, guys. It's nice to hear so many midwives pipe up.
And my daughter.
And your daughter, yeah.
Yeah, no, he gave me. And sorry for my son screaming in the back. Bedtime now.
All right.
Don't worry.
Family affair, clearly.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam.
No
Thank you.
worries.
Have a good
Bye.
evening.
Bye.
You too, guys. Bye.